A federal rule just dropped that reclassifies what counts as a firearm in America, and if you bought a parts kit, an unfinished frame, or a receiver blank in the last few years, you might already be in possession of an unregistered weapon and not even know it. The ATF's final rule on frames and receivers is now back in full effect in most states for 2026, and gun owners across the country are scrambling too. Figure out if their weekend hobby just became a federal crime. Quick question before we go any further. Are you subscribed to this channel? Because this update affects every single gun owner who has ever bought a kit, and I drop videos like this every time a rule changes. Hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next ruling that could hit your state next week. Let me explain what just happened and why it matters too. Right now, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives published what they call the Frame and Receiver Final Rule. The rule came out back in 2022. It was supposed to go into effect immediately. It got challenged in court. It got partially blocked in some states. Then it got allowed again in pieces. Today, in 2026, after a string of appeals court decisions, the rule is fully enforced in most of the country again. Here's what you need to know in plain English. The rule redefines what legally counts as a firearm frame or receiver. Before this rule, a piece of metal or plastic that was not yet a working gun was treated like a part, not a weapon. After this rule, certain unfinished frames and certain kits are now classified as firearms. They need a serial number. They need to be sold by a licensed dealer. They need to go through a background check, and if you have one without a serial that was made or transferred after the cutoff date, you could be charged with possession of an unregistered firearm. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. The rule does not just cover fully finished frames, it also covers parts kits and polymer pieces that meet a single legal test. The test is called readily convertible. Translation in plain English: if a person with common tools in 1 hour can turn that part into a working gun, the ATF now treats that part as the gun itself. Let me show you exactly how this worked before the rule and how it works now. Before the rule, an 80% lower receiver for an AR-style rifle was treated as a hunk of aluminum. You could buy it online, you could finish it at home with a drill press, you could build a working rifle. No serial number, no registration, no dealer paperwork. That loophole existed for 2 decades. The hobby industry was built around it. After the rule, that same 80% lower can now be classified as a firearm the moment it ships to your door. If it does not have a serial number from a licensed manufacturer, you are legally in possession of an unregistered firearm, federal felony, up to 10 years in prison. A simple hobby build became a potential prison sentence overnight. If this is making sense to you right now, my next video covers the 5 words to say the moment a cop asks about your firearm. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos of traffic stops, and the same line has gotten charges dropped in 7 states I know of. Hit subscribe right now so you don't miss that one, because the wording matters a lot and most people get it wrong. Now let me show you exactly who this rule actually affects today, in 2026. 3 groups of people need to pay attention right now before they pick up another kit. First group, anyone who has an unfinished frame or receiver blank sitting in their safe that they bought after the cutoff date. The rule applies forward. It does not force you to register old frames from before the rule, but anything you bought after the cutoff that does not have a serial number is now an unregistered firearm. You can be arrested, you can be searched, you can lose the right to own a gun for life. Second group, anyone who buys parts kits from online retailers, polymer 80 style kits, aluminum 80% kits, ghost gun kits sold under friendly-sounding names. Every kit that meets the readily convertible standard is now legally a firearm the day it arrives. That means the buyer needs to go through a licensed dealer to receive the kit legally. Third group, anyone who 3D prints a frame using downloaded files. If the file is from a manufacturer and produces a frame that fits the definition, the printed frame is treated as a firearm. If it does not have a serial, it is treated as an unregistered firearm. The technology does not save you from the law. Hey, 70% of people watching this video right now are not subscribed. That means most gun owners are missing legal updates like this until after they are already in federal trouble. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these updates the day they drop. Click subscribe and turn on the bell so the next ruling does not catch you off guard. Most gun owners think this rule only applies to criminals building untraceable guns for the street. That is not true. The rule applies to anyone who receives a qualifying kit after the cutoff date: hobbyists, collectors, range regulars, people who wanted to save $200 by buying a kit instead of a complete lower. They are all caught in the same net. Here's the reality. The language in the rule is so broad that several lawsuits have tried to narrow it. Gun rights groups argue parts kits are not firearms. State attorneys general argue the rule violates the Administrative Procedure Act. The federal courts have disagreed with each other across different rulings. That means the rule is alive in some states, partially paused in others, and the courts keep flipping. The trend in 2026 is full enforcement. The U.S. Supreme Court has not yet stepped in to shut it down. The simplest way to explain why this rule matters so much right now is to compare what changed in the legal definition before the rule. A frame was legally a firearm when it reached a certain stage of manufacturing. 80% complete was treated as a part. 20% complete was barely more than a chunk of metal. After the rule, the line moved completely. The new test is not about how much is missing. The new test is how easily the missing part can be added. If a person with normal tools and normal skills can finish the part in a few hours, the ATF now treats it like a finished gun. Let me show you exactly how a normal gun owner got caught in this trap using a real hypothetical example so you can see how it plays out in real life. Imagine a father in Texas. He ordered a polymer pistol frame kit for his son's birthday present. He paid with a credit card. The seller shipped it 2 weeks later. The kit arrived in a brown box, no serial number on the frame. Under the new rule, that kit is legally a firearm. The father is now in possession of an unregistered firearm. Federal felony, up to 10 years. He did not know. The ATF does not care. The U.S. Attorney's Office does not care. This is 100% legal under the rule. The government can charge you based on the fact pattern alone. The lack of a serial number is the smoking gun for the prosecutor. The fact that you bought a kit thinking it was part of a project does not matter in federal court. This is 100% legal in every state that follows the federal rule. California, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Delaware, and the District of Columbia already enforce the rule. Other states have their own laws that go even further than the federal rule. If you live in any state with strict gun laws, you are facing double exposure to charges, federal on top of state. Now let me break down what you actually need to do about this if you own any of those pieces right now. 3 steps matter this week. First step, inventory your safe right now. Pull out every unfinished frame, every receiver blank, every parts kit. Look at the receipt. Write down the date of purchase. Write down whether it has a serial number. If you bought it after the rule's cutoff date and it does not have a serial, you are technically in possession of an unregistered firearm right now. Federal law. Second step, stop ordering new kits through the mail without going through a licensed dealer. The rule says any frame or receiver that meets the new definition must be sold through a federal firearms licensee, also called ANFEL. That means a background check. That means a transfer fee. That means a record on the federal side. If you buy a kit from a private seller online without going through a dealer, you just broke the law. Third step, check your state's specific serialization rules. Some states have free serialization programs run by the state police or through a licensed gunsmith. California, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Hawaii all have legal pathways for serializing an unfinished frame, so it becomes a registered firearm in your name. If your state has that program, the serial turns a federal felony into a legal hobby again. Listen closely because this is critical for anyone with a parts box. The federal rule does not give you a grace period. There is no amnesty window for the kits you already own. There is no registration path that wipes out the past. The only way to clean up is to legal serializer through a state program or to surrender or destroy the frame under a documented process. The longer you wait, the worse your situation gets if you are ever searched. This information could be challenged again in court by the end of 2026. Subscribe right now because the next video explains the deadlines most gun owners are missing and the small paperwork fix that could save you from a decade in federal prison. Now let me walk you through the legal architecture so you can see the wall you are up against right now. 3 laws matter most in this situation. First law, the Gun Control Act of 1968. This is the federal law that defines what counts as a firearm. It says any weapon that will expel a projectile by explosive action is a firearm. The ATF has used this law to expand the legal definition of firearm to include frames, receivers, and now certain parts kits. Translation in plain English. The same law that regulates your Glock also regulates that unfinished block of aluminum in your safe. Second law, the National Firearms Act of 1934. This law covers machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, suppressors, and destructive devices. If your parts kit produces a pistol with a vertical forward grip, it might trigger the National Firearms Act on top of the frame rule that adds another felony layer and another 5-year minimum every kit. Build in 2026 needs to be checked for both laws at the same time. Third law, the Untraceable Firearms Act proposals sitting in Congress right now. Federal lawmakers have introduced bills that would specifically ban ghost gun parts, prosecute sellers, and require serialization for every frame sold. Even if the ATF rule gets struck down again next year, Congress has been moving on its own ban. Two paths exist to take away parts kits, and both of them are alive right now. Defense attorneys use this exact argument in federal gun cases. They say the firearm was not operable at the time of the search. They say the part alone is not a firearm. They say the rule exceeds the ATF's statutory authority, that defense has worked in some cases. It has failed in others. It depends on the judge, it depends on the state, it depends on the exact wording of the charging document. Former police officers have confirmed this trend from the street side. They say prosecutors are stacking gun charges on top of traffic stops now. They say gun owners are getting caught in paperwork mistakes, not violent crimes. They say the safe move right now in 2026 is to get every unfinished frame serialized and registered if your state allows it. Legal experts agree this is the moment to act if you have unfinished frames in. You're safe right now. The longer you wait, the more your federal exposure grows. The statute of limitations on possession of an unregistered firearm is 5 years. The clock starts running the moment you take possession of the unregistered part. The clock keeps running every day you still own it. A DIY hobby today becomes a federal case 5 years from now if you never fix it. Now let me give you the practical playbook for right now. In 2026, 6 things every gun owner should run through this week before the next traffic stop, the next gun show, or the next 3D print. First, inventory your safe. Count every unfinished frame, every receiver blank, every parts kit. Write down where you bought it, when you bought it, and whether it has a serial number. The receipt matters. The date on the receipt matters. The presence or absence of a serial matters. Without those 3 facts, you cannot know if the federal rule applies to you. Second, stop receiving new kits through the mail without going through a licensed dealer. Direct from manufacturer kits with serials are still legal. The rule requires manufacturers to mark receivers with a serial number if they want to ship them as firearms. Buying direct from a manufacturer who applied a serial before shipping is usually legal. Buying from a parts kit seller who does not serialize is now illegal. Third, check your state's own serialization rules right now. Some states have free or low-cost serialization programs for legal hobbyists. California, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and Hawaii each have a path to make your kit legal. A 30-minute call to your state police firearms bureau can tell you if your state has a program and what it costs. Fourth, do not throw unfinished frames in the regular trash. Destroying an unfinished frame without documentation can be treated as destroying evidence. The safer move is to take it to a licensed dealer and ask for a documented destruction certificate or a state-approved serialization path. A receipt from a dealer protects you later if there is ever a question about what happened to that frame. Fifth, keep every receipt you have from every gun-related purchase for the last 3 years. The date on the receipt tells the federal prosecutor whether the rule applies to your frame. If the date is before the cutoff, the rule may not apply. If the date is after the cutoff, the rule applies and the lack of a serial becomes the fact that leads to a felony charge. Sixth, talk to a gun law attorney if you have more than one unfinished frame or if you have transferred any of these items to other people in the last 3 years. A single consult with a real gun law attorney in your state will cost less than a federal public defender on the back end. A good attorney will know the local U.S. Attorney's Office stance and the recent case law in your district. Now, quick legal note before we close out. This is educational information, not legal advice. Every gun owner situation is different. Always consult an attorney in your state for your specific situation. Laws change, court rulings change, federal enforcement priorities change. Dedicating an hour to a real attorney now is cheaper than a decade in federal prison. Coming up next week, I am dropping a video on the exact words to say when an officer asks if there is a gun in the car during a traffic stop. That single sentence has gotten charges dropped in 7 states that I know of. Subscribe right now so you do not miss that one. Turn the bell on. Share this with anyone who owns an unfinished frame, a parts kit, or a 3D printer that produces firearms frames because they need to. Act before they become a stat in the next federal gun case. Stay safe out there. Remember that the frame and receiver rule is now in full effect across most of the country again. The hobby changed, the paperwork changed, the penalties changed. Make sure your safe is on the right side of the law before the next traffic stop, the next gun show, or the next package you take to the post office.